My brother impregnated my fiancée, ridiculed me behind my back, and my family expected me to raise their child. I'm a 32-year-old man who was engaged to Kay, a 29-year-old woman for 3 years. We were living together, and I have a 4-year-old son from a previous relationship. While things were not perfect, I believe you were doing okay. I had envisioned a life where my son would have a sibling and I would have the opportunity to create the family I always desired, just the simple dreams most men harbor. When Kay discovered she was pregnant 3 weeks ago, I initially felt joy. I thought this was the beginning of a new chapter, the moment where everything would finally fall into place. However, instead of drawing us closer, the pregnancy seemed to push her further away. The day after she shared the news with me, she began to distance herself. She became reserved, aloof, and engrossed in her phone. I assumed she was simply overwhelmed, needing time to digest the news. I gave her the space she seemed to crave, believing that was the right thing to do. But that distance only grew. The nights grew longer, with unanswered questions swirling in my mind as Kay kept her phone either on silent or face down. Whenever I mustered the courage to broach the subject of her feelings about the baby, her responses were always vague and dismissive, as if my concern was an unwelcome intrusion. Despite my nagging intuition that something was amiss, I pushed aside any doubts, convincing myself that I was merely overthinking things. However, one fateful night shattered the facade I had been desperately clinging to. Kay inadvertently left her laptop unlocked while she stepped away for a shower. Though I hesitated at first, a notification with my brother N's name alongside a suggestive emoji caught my eye. Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, I could not resist delving into the conversation. What I discovered left me in stunned disbelief. Their exchanges revealed a clandestine relationship that had been flourishing behind my back for months. As I pored over the messages, the betrayal unfolded before my eyes, with them ridiculing my obliviousness and taking advantage of my trust. The realization that they had been arranging rendezvous while I was at home tending to our son hit me like a ton of bricks. But the most devastating blow was yet to come. Kay had shared the news of her pregnancy with my older brother M before informing me. Not only did she disclose details to him that she had kept from me, but they even joked about my reaction to raising 2 children. It felt as though the ground had fallen from beneath my feet. M, the golden child of our family, who always commanded attention with his charm and confidence, had exceeded the boundaries of brotherly conduct. I had grown accustomed to living in his shadow, but this betrayal went beyond mere favoritism. The following days were filled with sleepless nights as I cycled through emotions of anger, disbelief, and a thirst for retribution. I was determined not to remain silent and let them escape consequences. Their efforts to humiliate me would not go unanswered. As a family gathering approached to celebrate Kay's pregnancy at our parents' house, the bitter irony was not lost on me. I resolved to confront them publicly at the event. No discreet confrontations or unspoken separations. I wanted everything to be laid bare for all to see. I have gathered all the evidence. Screenshots of the messages, timestamps, and the complete truth. I made sure to be well prepared and not show up empty-handed. If they chose to believe they were above consequences, I was determined to prove them wrong. Tomorrow, I will take action and I won't be extinguishing the fire. As I woke up the next day, I felt a combination of fear and adrenaline pulsing through me. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump without knowing the outcome. The image of Kay and N laughing and thinking they had deceitfully lingered in my mind, but it fueled my determination to move forward. I double-checked the screenshots to ensure everything was in order, leaving no room for escape. The messages exposed the whole story, the betrayals, the breaches of trust, and the mockery. I saved them in a folder named Evidence on my phone and even printed out some of the most incriminating ones. I entered my parents' house with a plan to prevent any denials during conversations. As soon as I arrived, I found my mom and Kate in the kitchen preparing side dishes together. The sight of them working side by side enraged me. Kay seemed so at ease, so nonchalant, despite the havoc she had caused in my life. Oblivious to the impending confrontation, she laughed at something my mom said. Meanwhile, N lounged on the living room couch, exuding his usual air of arrogance. His relaxed demeanor grated on my nerves, but I refrained from reacting immediately. I wanted an audience for what was about to unfold. As we gathered around the dinner table, my mom happily discussed her excitement about becoming a grandmother again, unaware of the impending turmoil. The tension in the room was palpable as I sat across from Kay, who appeared unperturbed, while I continued to eat nonchalantly a few seats away. As the conversation lulled, I sensed the moment to address the situation had arrived. Setting down my fork, I cleared my throat loudly, drawing everyone's attention. The room fell into a hush as all eyes turned towards me. My dad paused with his knife in hand, and my mom regarded me with a puzzled expression. Kay fidgeted in her seat, and Em leaned back with an air of indifference. "I need everyone's attention, please," I announced, my voice resolute despite the hammering of my heart. "There's something important I need to disclose about Kay," and MK's eyes widened, her complexion draining of color, while M visibly straightened up, his previous nonchalance dissipating. My mom looked bewildered, but my dad's demeanor hardened, sensing the gravity of the impending revelation. "I've kept this to myself for weeks, but I can't continue to do so," I declared. "Kay and N have been carrying on a secret relationship behind my back, even after Kay and I." Tension filled the room as Kay's unexpected pregnancy revelation sparked gasps of surprise. My mom's hands flew to cover her mouth while my dad's jaw clenched tightly. Kay appeared on the verge of tears, while M sat in stunned silence, his emotions alternating between shock and anger. With resolve, I declared, "I have proof," and reached for my phone to reveal incriminating messages in a folder. As I read aloud their deceitful exchanges, Kay broke down in sobs, pleading, "It's not what it seems. I never wanted this." I let out a bitter laugh, realizing she didn't regret the affair but only getting caught. Standing up abruptly, M dismissed the situation arrogantly, declaring it ridiculous and suggesting we continue the discussion elsewhere. Defiantly, I stood my ground, facing him head on. "You don't get to choose how this plays out. You betrayed me, and I won't just let it go." Before anyone could react further, the situation escalated, and lunged at me, he punched me in the shoulder, but I barely felt it. The rage I was carrying inside was too strong for a punch to stop me. I punched him back straight in the jaw. The room became chaos. My dad tried to separate us, and my mom was yelling for us to stop. But I was not done. "You ruined my life," I yelled, shoving him against the wall. "You had everything, and the family adored you, and yet you had to take what was mine." He smirked, blood trickling down his lip. "Maybe if you had been man enough to make her happy, this would not have happened. That was it." I threw another punch, but my dad finally stepped between us, pushing me back. "Enough," he yelled. "Both of you sit down." I stepped back, breathing heavily, my fist still clenched. Kay was now sobbing uncontrollably, and my mom was crying too, begging me to calm down. M wiped the blood from his mouth and smirked again, but he did not say anything. He knew better. I looked at Kay, who was trembling in her seat. "It's over," I said coldly. "I do. I don't care for your excuses. If you want to be with him, go ahead. But don't expect me to be a part of this again." Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my phone and left the house. The sound of Kay's cries and my mom calling my name followed me, but I didn't look back. I had revealed the truth, and there was no turning back. As I drove home, the adrenaline from the argument still pumped through my veins, my heart racing and my thoughts spinning. I kept replaying the confrontation in my mind. Kay's tear-streaked face, M's smug grin, and my dad holding me back before things escalated further. None of it brought me any satisfaction. Instead, it left a bitter taste in my mouth. Arriving home to a quiet house, as my son was staying over at a friend's, normally would have been a relief, but that night the silence felt oppressive. Just weeks ago, I had been envisioning the future with Kay and eagerly anticipating the arrival of our baby. Rise together. Unaware of her true self, I received a sudden interruption from my phone as it vibrated on the coffee table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Kay, who had sent 3 messages in less than 5 minutes, pleading for a conversation, expressing regret, and asking for a chance to explain. I chose to ignore her as I was not prepared to listen to her justifications. Instead, I opened the folder on my phone that contained the messages from the family dinner, serving as a constant reminder of the disrespect and mockery I had endured. Although anger started to resurface, I made a conscious effort not to let it overpower me. With a son who depended on me, I needed to remain resilient for his sake. The following days passed by in a blur as I carried on with work, picked up my son from school, and attempted to keep my mind off the situations involving Kay and M, who made it challenging. Despite Kay persistently texting and leading on her voicemails, I refused to engage. Meanwhile, M remained silent, likely recovering from our altercation. My mother attempted to call me, adding to the mix of emotions and turmoil. Every day, they persisted in asking me to meet with them and talk, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Talk about what? They had caused so much destruction, and no apology could undo that. Update: 2 weeks after the family dinner, there was a sudden knock on my door. It was Kay, standing there with red, puffy eyes and disheveled hair. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, holding a crumpled tissue and a small bag. "Can we talk?" she pleaded. I hesitated at first, not expecting her visit, but eventually opened the door, mindful of my sleeping son upstairs. As she stood there, asking to fix things, I felt a mix of disdain and anger towards her. "What do you want?" I asked coldly, arms crossed. Despite her desperate plea to work things out for the sake of the baby, I found it hard to see a way past the hurt and destruction she had caused. "Do you really think we can fix this?" I asked skeptically, shaking my head as I stepped aside to allow her to enter. "Fine, go ahead and say what you need to say." She walked past me, placed her bag on the couch, and turned to look at me, appearing anxious. When I discovered I was pregnant, I panicked. He was there, and I made a mistake, but it didn't mean anything. "I love you," she confessed. I scoffed at her declaration. "Love me? Your actions certainly don't show it," I replied, taking a step closer and lowering my voice. "Do you have any idea how much time I spent questioning everything, wondering how I could have been so oblivious? You didn't just cheat on me, Kay," I mocked. "You turned me into a laughingstock." Her eyes welled up with tears as she reached out to touch my arm, but I recoiled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please don't do this. Let's not throw everything away." "I didn't throw anything away," I snapped back. "You did? And don't use the baby as some sort of magic solution to fix this. That baby might not even be mine." She looked devastated, shaking her head vigorously. "It's yours, I swear," she insisted. Couldn't bring myself to believe her. "Prove it," I stated coldly, my emotions well hidden beneath a steely exterior. "Get a paternity test. Until then, don't expect me to believe anything you say." Her tears flowed uncontrollably, rendering her barely able to stand. I observed her breakdown, unmoving and unable to offer comfort. There was nothing left for me to give her. After a few moments, she composed herself, retrieved her bag, and whispered, "I will get the test before exiting." I shut and locked the door behind her, leaning my head against the wood. Tremors ran through my hands as the weight of the situation crashed down on me once more, but I refused to let my emotions be on display. 3 days later, Em arrived at my door, banging on it like Kay had done before. This time, however, I was prepared. As I opened the door, he stood there with his familiar arrogant expression, seemingly believing he could charm his way out of anything. "We need to talk," he began, attempting to enter as if nothing had transpired. I blocked his path. "No, ignoring my attempt to stop him, Ty insisted on taking the test. "Do you really believe prolonging this will benefit you?" My anger surged. "Dragging this out? You think I'm the one drawing this out? You were the one who betrayed me with my fiancée, and you have the audacity to act like everything is normal." He smirked. His words triggered something in me, and I pounced on him, landing a punch on his jaw. We tumbled back onto the porch, exchanging blows until a neighbor intervened to break us apart. "Both of you, get away from me." "It's over," the neighbor urged. Wiping the blood from his lip, Ty chuckled bitterly. "You'll never be able to walk away completely, brother. Not when a child is involved." I stood silent as Ted walked away, got into his car, and sped off. Locking the door behind me, I realized he was wrong. I could walk away from them, from both of them. All that was left now was to wait for the results and consider my next moves. In the following weeks, I dedicated my time to. Stuck in a state of uncertainty, waiting for the paternity test results felt agonizingly slow, as if time had stretched out like a sluggish crawl. Each passing day felt like a ticking clock toward either liberation or further entanglement in a web of complexities. Despite my attempts to convince myself that I was indifferent to the outcome, the reality was that deep down, I wasn't prepared for any eventuality. The impending results held the power to herald either an escape from the chaos involving Kate and Em or a lifelong commitment to co-parenting with Kate, always wary of Em's looming presence. Seeking solace in work, I endeavored to distract myself from the nighttime insecurities that haunted me. My son emerged as my steadfast anchor during this tumultuous period, grounding me when the weight of uncertainty threatened to overwhelm. Our weekends together spent building Lego structures, baking less than perfect cookies, and watching beloved animated films repeatedly served as reminders that amidst the fractured pieces of my world, there remained moments of profound connection and joy. As I navigated through this turbulent chapter of my life, Kay persistently attempted to reach out to me. I rarely responded to Kay's messages, only addressing logistical matters such as doctor appointments, updates on the baby's health, and test result timelines. She seemed to understand that she did not deserve my attention until she had answers, so she wasn't as persistent as before. In contrast, M had stayed silent since our argument, but I didn't care either way. Then the day finally arrived while I was at work. As I received the email notification on my phone, my hands trembled when I opened it. It took a moment for me to focus on the words displayed before me. I took a deep breath and read the results slowly. Paternity result 0%. I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. The realization that the baby was not mine felt like a weight lifted from my chest, but it also left me with a hollow feeling in my stomach. I had spent months mentally preparing to be a father again, even though things with Kay were difficult. The responsibility I had been ready to take on was suddenly no longer mine to bear. Visibility had vanished, and what was supposed to feel triumphant instead left me with a sense of unease. As I drove home in silence after leaving work early, my thoughts raced. The idea of encountering either of them made my stomach twist, yet I acknowledged that I could not evade the confrontation indefinitely. Upon reaching home, I swiftly composed a message to Kay, urging her to meet me for an urgent discussion. Her prompt response agreed to come over, perhaps anticipating a chance to mend things or a civil arrangement for the baby. However, my intentions were grounded in closure rather than reconciliation. When she arrived, she appeared anxious. I did not offer her a seat, instead standing in the living room with my arms folded, awaiting her response. She tentatively inquired if everything was all right, prompting me to reveal the paternity test results still visible on my phone screen. Her complexion drained, and she involuntarily stepped backward. Despite her trembling voice as she asked about the findings, she seemed to already grasp the inevitable truth. I confronted her, informing her that the baby belonged to Aunt, not me. Despite her tear-filled eyes, I couldn't summon any sympathy. I questioned her decision to keep me in the dark about the truth. After a moment of silence, she asked what would happen next. My response was clear. She needed to leave and resolve the situation with him. I made it clear that I was ending the relationship. As she left, defeated and wordless, I felt a sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. This chapter was closed, but the emotional damage would need time to heal. With my son, my job, and a future without her betrayal, I finally felt a sense of freedom. Over the next few months, updates on their situation reached me through family and mutual friends. I had started dabbling in drugs, nothing too serious at first, but enough for it to be noticeable. His once shining reputation as the golden child had dulled, with relatives who had once praised him now struggling to conceal their disappointment. Meanwhile, Kay was coming to terms with the reality of being in a relationship with someone who was not as flawless as he had initially appeared during their clandestine meetings. Amidst all this, I chose to focus on myself and my son, immersing myself in my work, which had evolved from just being a source of income to being a personal mission. I had been part of a small tech startup for years, but in light of recent events, I channeled all my energy into excelling. I willingly took on challenging projects, clocked in extra hours to meet deadlines, and presented innovative ideas in meetings. My hard work did not go unnoticed, and within 6 months, I earned a promotion to project manager, overseeing a team and managing important clients. While it was gratifying to be acknowledged, more than anything else, it brought me the financial stability that I craved. After my breakup, therapy empowered me with the ability and confidence to start anew in my career. This positive shift allowed me to move to a better neighborhood and enroll my son in a top-notch school. Our weekends were now filled with visits to parks, museums, and even weekend getaways. Ensuring a stable and happy environment for my son became a priority, bringing me joy to see him carefree. Cutting ties with Kay in an end was vindicated by the joy I saw in my son. I also made self-care a priority by reconnecting with old friends, hitting the gym regularly, and exploring hiking. While my days weren't flawless, they were uniquely mine, making all the difference. Unexpectedly, about a year post-breakup, I crossed paths with someone special. We'll call her R. Our encounter at a mutual friend's housewarming party transitioned from casual chat about travel to exchanging numbers and daily conversations. Rachel embodied the qualities I had longed for: genuine, supportive, and kind-hearted. Do not play games with my emotions or make me doubt myself. She encouraged me, respected my boundaries, and was as passionate about life as I was becoming. Again, we took things slow. But as the months passed, it became clear that she was different. She loved spending time with my son and treated him like he was a part of her world without overstepping. Seeing them bond melted my heart in a way I did not think possible after the disaster with Kay. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had someone by my side who truly deserved to be there. Meanwhile, Kay and M's lives continued to fall apart. Kay had the baby, but M was not taking any responsibility. From what I heard, he came and went, made promises he did not keep. and disappeared when things got tough. Their relationship, if you could even call it that, was in shambles. M's drug use had escalated, and he was no longer the charming guy who knew how to get his way. He was now a burden, and Kay was left to deal with the consequences. To me, awkward Kay would show up alone, avoid eye contact, and keep the conversation short. My mom, out of pity, tried to convince me to talk to her, but I refused. I had built something better for myself, and I was not going to risk it by reopening old wounds. The news about K and M did not affect me the way it used to. In fact, it only served as a reminder of how far I had come. Final update. Months passed and my life continued to improve in ways I never imagined. My work was thriving. The startup I had joined years ago was now growing rapidly, and I had been promoted to senior project manager. I was overseeing major projects, negotiating deals with high profile clients, and making more money than I ever had. I had even started saving for a family vacation with R and my son, something that felt surreal considering where I was a year ago. R and I had grown closer. She had become a pillar in my life, someone I could rely on without having to question her intentions. We spent our weekends hiking, trying new restaurants. After putting my son to bed, I found solace in the routine of observing ants and binge watching shows, perfectly content with my life. Then, the universe delivered a stark reminder of how far I had come. News that my brother N had been arrested for drug possession and trafficking, igniting a frenzy of disbelief and disappointment in our family group chat. My mother's voice trembled with distress as she grappled with how her once esteemed son had spiraled to such depths. What are we going to do? She implored, her voice cracking. I had no answer, and truth be told, I felt indifferent. M had charted his course, and now he must face the repercussions. Meanwhile, Kay was also struggling. Whispers through the grapevine painted a picture of her life unraveling. Forced to move back in with our parents due to financial strain, she bore the weight of raising her child alone after N retreated into the shadows, crushing her, and I could not say I felt sorry for her. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen helping her prepare dinner when the doorbell rang. I wiped her hands on a towel and went to answer it. I heard the door open, followed by a moment of silence. I quickly walked over, and there was Kay standing on my porch, looking like she had not slept in days. Her eyes were red and puffy. For a moment, she looked like she was going to collapse, or looked at me with a questioning expression. I nodded, and without a word, she went upstairs to give us some space. Kay gave me a broken smile and said, "Looks like you found someone new." I looked at her coldly. "Why are you here?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. I did not know where else to go. "I need your help, please. I cannot do this alone. I cannot afford daycare or the bills. My parents are helping, but it is not enough. M is gone and I do not know what to do." Her voice cracked at the end, but I was not moved. The memories of her betrayal were all I could see when I gazed at her, familiar face whose actions had once shattered my world, now seeking solace from me. "Let me get this straight," I began, my voice betraying a hint of sarcasm. "You had an affair with my brother, deceived me about the child's paternity, watched as everything crumbled around me, and now you expect me to come to your aid?" She flinched, but I pressed on, seeking resolution. "You orchestrated the downfall of my life, and now that your own perfect scheme has unraveled, you suddenly seek my assistance." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I was foolish." I interjected sharply, cutting her off. "I have no interest in hearing your apologies. They hold no weight with me now. You stand before me expecting me to rectify the chaos you and others created. I'm sorry, but there is no ounce of compassion left within me for you. As I look at you, all I feel is disdain." Tears welled in her eyes, yet I remained resolute. Despite her pleas, I maintained my hardened facade. "For the child's sake, I understand he is not my responsibility, but you claim I am the only one who cares." I shook my head, my features devoid of emotion. "I may have cared once, but that bond has long been severed. He used to be mine, but now he's not thanks to you." She appeared on the verge of collapsing, but she managed to stay upright. "I'm left with no one else. I don't know what to do." "Then figure it out, Kay," I said, recalling how I had to find my own way when both you and Ann wrecked my life. "Seek help from your parents, but don't ever come back here." Before she could respond, I motioned for her to leave and not return. Watching her walk away with tears streaming down her face, I felt a sense of relief as I closed the door. Returning downstairs, she inquired if everything was fine. I reassured her with a smile, giving her a hug. "Yes, everything is fine." Sitting down to finish dinner, I realized how fortunate I was. I had a woman who cared for me, a thriving son, and a life that had only improved since Kay and N were no longer a part of it. I found solace in the fact that I didn't have to concern myself with their troubles. That was their burden to bear. The burden to carry is not mine. My responsibility was to ensure that I never allowed anyone like them into my life.